What happened was that you gave us a lot of different pieces in the end. You thought a lot about the instruments and the different kind of, like you're creating a palette for the film with instruments in a way that designers often do with colour choices or other materials they may or may not decide to use.
It's like opening a cupboard of spices, you know, that it's sort of endless what you can do and the flavours that are there, that it's just, why would you not start like that? And also limit yourself to like 3 or 4 and then just obsess about them, and when the banjo doesn't work, then throw it out embarrassedly. And when stuff like the French horn or whatever, the piano works, then you know that it's something you can focus and think about all the time.
The cello played as guitar, which opens the film. Like, how did you come up with that idea?
The cello idea just came about from trying to play the cello like a banjo. In a way, recycling some of the banjo ideas that didn't work, just putting them straight onto a cello and learning to play it in a sort of finger-picking style. And I think the result is something that's, you get that nice confusion of it being a sound you recognise, but it's not a style that you're familiar with. So it's sort of familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, hopefully. I was tuning each cello and viola to C, then C sharp, then D, and recording hundreds of cellos and violas to make it sound like an orchestra playing. We talked about how at the start of the film, for sure, it would be a shame to not have a sense of momentum.
Yeah, momentum was important.
Yeah, it's easy to just get sucked into a vortex of writing slow and beautiful and, you know, whatever pieces of music that have no pulse and excitement to them. So that worked eventually. It's weird because I don't really do film music that much. But what was great is that you asked me so far ahead. So we had the fun of discussing music and talking about instruments all before, even while you were shooting. So I was really grateful for that. It seems nuts to me when directors just use a bit of temporary music and then get the composer in 2 weeks before the deadline.
No, I think it's heartbreaking actually, because there's something really weird that goes on too when you are cutting to temp music. It's actually, you're weaving it into your brain somehow, and it's really hard to remove its rightness, you know, and to be really open to anything else. So it's a sort of mental stumbling block that never really goes away.
The banjo can be nice and dark and sinister, but it just felt like there's so much real banjo playing in the film. It felt like it would have ruined the score to have yet more banjo played by somebody else.
I think that was a good call. I mean, I also felt like stepping away from it was really brilliant because the banjo wasn't going to get us into the spaces we wanted to get to, do you think?
Yeah, we decided early on, didn't we, that his character would suit music that wasn't necessarily traditional, you know, Western American folky. It's actually quite sinister when he's playing it, when he's practicing and has that character to it. Yeah, that worked really well, I thought.
How much were you thinking this piano is going to be like a sort of haunted version of Rose, you know?
It felt like the piano was hugely symbolic for Rose and her sort of social awkwardness. So that was another reason to think, well, let's push it into being inhuman in how it sounds. And the fact that it kind of became a theme for Rose and her drunkenness and her confusion. And that's when it really connected, I think, as an idea.
I remember you called the piano banjo face-off that Rose and Phil had as the ugly duet, which always struck me as a great title for it.
Well, that was such a lovely moment in the script.
The French horns really, that's how they came out sounding, you know, that sad repression, lonely. They also sound like whales calling out to each other underwater or something, you know.
And all the shots in the desert, all the sort of the wilderness and the mountains made it look even more alien and foreboding, I think.
And quite masculine, do you think, as well?
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
It feels like a Western in a way.
Weirdly reminded me of 1960s Star Trek, in a way. You know what I mean? It looked like the kind of landscape that would have been used.
Yes. That's really funny.
And the same with the cello in a way. I mean, there's not much in the music that's fey or dainty or wrapped up in the kind of romance of the landscape. It's nice that it's, I think, slightly darker and until you get to the sacred place, obviously.
When you talk about counterpointing things, can you explain what you mean?
I suppose it's trying to have music which is out of character and isn't what you necessarily expect. I suppose in a way, in the sacred place when he's going in and crawling in through that tunnel, some of that is unexpected, isn't it? The sort of the richness.
The loveliness in a way, you know, like it's, to me, it works with the sense that he's relaxed for the first time. He seems sort of authentic, not trying to push a masculine front or a harsh front. It's like this is the only place he can be himself. Did you write that for us, or was it something you already had?
No, I wrote it for you because it was, again, that thing of trying to get a limited palette together.
It has that sound of like emotionally kind of shocked me. It sort of just tumbled through your body. It's almost like I felt it in my body. So it was really visceral for me listening to that. I've worked with a lot of different composers and I think they're brilliant, but you really are stepping out of the canon in a way of classical music and reusing instruments in ways that we're just not familiar with. That is quite emotionally devastating in a way, because we don't know how to react. We haven't heard it before. And, you know, normally when I hear classical music played as score, I'm a little cynical, to be honest, because it feels like it's just can't avoid all the normal cliches of bringing the strings in to build emotion, things like that. And I so hate being manipulated. It just doesn't work on me.
I really feel for how film composers have to work, because everything has to be provided on demos that sound as close as possible to the real thing. And when you're working on software, it leads you in certain ways. You must know what that's like. It's just, supposedly it's a blank canvas when you open something like Photoshop, but at the same time you end up using the same kind of filters and doing the same sort of things, and you can feel like you're on a rail a little bit.
But how do you stay outside of that rail then? Because that's really not where you want to be, is it?
It helped the fact that the film has such a strange flavour to it. It's just not a story you're ever told, and the characters just don't remind you of characters in other films.
For me, it's just like so remarkable to have a composer who thinks about the characters in this way, who thinks about the story, who sees and hears it in the way that I do too.
Yeah, and also I remember getting the early footage of the cattle in the mountains, and it's just so beautiful, shot so beautifully, and it's just, that got me really excited as well. And that was inspiring for the music, just seeing those sort of images and seeing how it felt really, like I say, contemporary. It was like sweeping shots of the landscape, but it wasn't like how you've seen it before. Oh, it was amazing. It is amazing.
You hand your music over to us, Jonny, and then we started trying out different cues and seeing where they'd work and struggling with some and, you know, succeeding with others, you know, like shuffling it around. And was that frustrating for you that maybe thought we weren't using the right cues sometimes?
No, I mean, I always feel a little bit fraudulent that I'm quite rarely writing stuff directly to picture, and it's more sort of about the characters and the landscape, and usually means writing a lot more music than is needed, but it also means feel a lot freer to just sort of sit and write things.
I think what we tried to do was like really try everything, really be open and really go back and relook at cues that we thought maybe weren't going to work and then try them a little differently. Because I think how you actually use the music, or how you try to use it and, you know, repeat it thematically, but not too often. All these things I think are a part that the director and editor can really usefully contribute. There's that collision of image and piece of music where they're not necessarily born to each other, but then they start to bend each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm quite soppy and like the music to sound fairly romantic. We found that with the less and less vibrato they used, that it seemed to fit to the pictures we were looking at. And it was, again, I suppose it was that thing of just trying to take it away from being too syrupy and making it feel a bit like 20th century music.
And do you get excited about like other composers? Who do you get excited by as a composer?
Honestly, I find that generally I'm surprised how often I'm watching a sort of film that you don't think much attention has been placed to the score. And more often than not, there's some really interesting ideas and lots of great stuff being done. There's so many great composers. I mean, I feel for them, I feel like there's lots and lots of talent. I've got friends writing music for a TV show, actually. And, you know, it's very indulgent looking at it in the right way, how I get to work, how I get to just write and record.
The results really speak for themselves. I mean, I really do feel that now the film is finished and completed. When you're actually listening now to the mixed film, the music is so epic and powerfully integrated. It takes you some place you're not expecting. You know, even me, who's made it, knows everything about it. When I heard it again recently for the first time after being mixed, you know, I was kind of like, oh my God, it's really got an energy.
It's that thing of having a good reason to write music that's inspiring and having a deadline.
Yeah, I just remember when we heard the very first piece that you sent us, we just went, oh my God, that's it. That's our music. And thanks so deeply for the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you for asking me. And also, none of the music would be written or recorded if there wasn't a reason for it. So it's sort of the inspiration of the script and the images and the film that makes you want to write the music. So I feel very lucky and indulged. So thank you, Jane, really.
Thank you.